Good evening. My name is Joseph Sipitz, and I'm here for SJCPL and Saturday Night Stories. And tonight I'll be reading from Ernest Hemingway's The Nick Adams Stories. The reason why I'll be reading that is that in April, PBS is going to have a documentary by Ken Burns on Hemingway. So I thought this would be an opportune time for that. Um, the story I'm going to read, you need to know two things about it. One is that it takes place in northern Michigan, and the other thing you need to know is that if you get two guys together, they will not talk about anything that's important to them until you give them a few drinks. So let's begin with this. Okay. This story is called The 3-Day Blow. The rain stopped as Nick turned into the road that went up through the orchard. The fruit had been picked, and the fall wind blew through the bare trees. Nick stopped and picked up an apple from beside the road, shiny in the brown grass from the rain. He put the apple in his pocket of his Mackinaw coat. The road came out of the orchard onto the top of the hill. There was the cottage, the porch bare, smoke coming from up on the chimney. In back were the garage, the chicken coop, and the second growth timber, like a hedge against the woods behind. The big trees swayed over in the wind as he watched. It was the first of the autumn storms. As Nick crossed the open field above the orchard, the door of the cottage opened and Bill came out. He stood on the porch looking out. "Well, Wemmage," he said. "Hey, Bill," Nick said, coming up the steps. They stood together looking out across the country, down over the orchard, beyond the road, and across the lower fields and the woods to the point of the lake. The wind was blowing straight down the lake, and they could see the surf along 10-Mile Point. "She's blowing," Nick said. "Yeah, she'll blow like that for 3 days," Bill said. "Is your dad in?" Nick asked. "No, he's out with the gun. Come on in." Nick went inside the cottage. There was a big fire in the fireplace. The wind made it roar. Bill shut the door. "Have a drink?" he said. He went out to the kitchen and came back with 2 glasses and a pitcher of water. Nick reached the whiskey bottle from the shelf above the fireplace. "All right," he said. "Good," said Bill. They sat in front of the fire and drank Irish whiskey and water. "It's got a swell smoky taste," Nick said, and looked at the fire through the glass. "That's the peat," Bill said. "You can't put peat into liquor," Nick said. "That doesn't make any difference," Bill said. "Have you ever seen any peat?" Nick asked. "No," said Bill. "Neither have I," Nick said. His shoes, stretched out on the hearth, began to steam in front of the fire. "Better take your shoes off," Bill said. "I haven't got any socks on." "Take them off and dry them, and I'll get you some," Bill said. He went upstairs into the loft, and Nick heard him walking about overhead. Upstairs was open under the roof, and was where Bill and his father and he, Nick, sometimes slept. In back was the dressing room. They moved the cots back out of the rain and covered them with rubber blankets. Bill came down with a pair of heavy wool socks. "It's getting too late to go around without socks," he said. "I hate to start them again," Nick said. He pulled on his socks and slumped back into the chair, putting his feet up on the screen in front of the fire. "You'll dent the screen," Bill said. Nick swung his foot over to the side of the fireplace. "Got anything to read?" he asked. "Only the paper." "What did the cards do?" "Dropped the doubleheader to the Giants." "Well, that ought to cinch it for him." "It's a gift," Bill said. "As long as McGaw can buy every good ball player in the league, there's nothing to it." "He can't buy them all," Nick said. "He buys all the ones he wants," Bill said, "or he makes them discontented so they have to trade to him." "Like Heine Zim," Nick agreed. "That bonehead, that will do him a lot of good." Bill stood up. "He can hit," Nick offered. The heat from the fire was baking his legs. "He's a sweet fielder, too," Bill said, "but he loses ball games." "Maybe that's what McGraw wants him for," Nick suggested. "Maybe," Bill agreed. "There's always more to it than we know about," Nick said. "Of course, but we've got pretty good dope on this for being so far away. Like, how much better can you pick them if you don't see the horses?" "That's it." Bill reached down the whiskey bottle. His big hand went all the way around it. He poured the whiskey into the glass Nick held out. How much water? Just the same. He sat down on the floor beside Nick's chair. It's good when the fall storms come, isn't it? Nick said. It's swell. It's the best time of the year, Nick said. Wouldn't it be hell to be in town? Bill said. I'd like to see the World Series, Nick said. Well, they're always in New York or Philadelphia now, Bill said. That doesn't do us any good. I wonder if the Cards will ever win the pennant. Not in our lifetime, Bill said. Gee, they'd go crazy, Nick said. Do you remember when they got going that once before they had the train wreck? Boy, Nick said, remembering. Bill reached over to the table under the window for the book that lay there face down, where he had put it when he went to the door. He held his glass in one hand and the book in the other, leaning back against Nick's chair. What are you reading? Richard Feverel. I couldn't get into it. It's all right, Bill said. It's not a bad book, Wemmage. What else have you got that I haven't read? Nick asked. Did you read The Forest Lovers? Yep, that's the one where they go to bed every night with a naked sword in between them. That's a good book, Wemmage. It's a swell book. What I couldn't understand was what good the sword would do. It would have to stay edge up all the time, because if it went over flat, you could just roll right over it and it wouldn't make any other trouble. It's a symbol, Bill said. Sure, said Nick, but isn't practical. Did you ever read Fortitude? It's fine, Nick said. It's a real book. That's the one where the old man is after him all the time. Have you got any more like Walpole, by Walpole? The Dark Forest, Bill said. It's about Russia. What does he know about Russia? Nick asked. I don't know. You can't tell about these guys. Maybe he was there when he was a boy. He's got a lot of dope on it. I'd like to meet him, Nick said. I'd like to meet Chesterton, Bill said. I wish he was here right now, Nick said. We'd take him up fishing at the Bucks tomorrow. I wonder if he'd like to go fishing, Bill said. Sure, said Nick. He must be the best guy there is. Do you remember the flying in? If an angel out of heaven gives you something else to drink, thank him for his kind intentions. Go pour them down the sink. That's right, said Nick. I guess he's a better guy than Walpole. Oh, he's a better guy, all right, Bill said, but Walpole's a better writer. I don't know, Nick said. Chesterton's a classic. Walpole's a classic, too, Nick insisted. I wish we had them both here, Nick said. We'd take them both fishing at the Vox tomorrow. Let's get drunk, Bill said. All right, Nick agreed. My old man won't care, Bill said. Are you sure, said Nick. I know it, Bill said. I'm a little drunk now, Nick said. You aren't drunk, Bill said. He got up from the floor and reached for the whiskey bottle. Nick held out his glass, his eyes fixed on it while Bill poured. Bill poured the glass half full of whiskey. Put in your own water, he said. There's just one more shot. Got any more? Nick asked. There's plenty more, but Dad only likes me to drink what's open. Sure, said Nick. He says opening bottles is what makes drunkards. Ha, Bill explained. That's right, said Nick. He was impressed. He had never thought of that before, but he always thought of it as a solitary drinking that made drunkards. How's your dad? He asked respectfully. He's all right, Bill said. He gets a little wild sometimes. He's a swell guy, Nick said. He poured water into his glass out of his pitcher. It mixed slowly with the whiskey. There was more whiskey than water. You bet your life he is, Bill said. My old man's all right, Nick said. You damn right he is, said Bill. He claims he's never taken a drink in his life, Nick said, as though he's announcing a scientific fact. Well, he's a doctor. My old man's a painter. That's different. He's missed a lot, Nick said sadly. You can tell, Nick said. Everything's got its compensations. He said he's missed a lot himself, Nick confessed. Well, Dad's had a tough time, Bill said. It all evens up, Nick said. They sat looking into the fire and thinking about this profound truth. I'll get a chunk from the back porch, Nick said. He had noticed that while looking into the fire, that the fire was dying down. He also wished to show that he could hold his liquor and be practical. Even if his father had never touched a drop, Bill was not going to get him drunk before he himself was drunk. Bring one of the big beach chunks, Bill said. He was also being consciously practical. Nick came in with a log through the kitchen and, in passing, knocked a pan off the kitchen table. He laid the log down, picked up the pan. It had contained dried apricots soaking in water. He carefully picked up all the apricots off the floor. Some of them had gone under the stove, and he put them back in the pan. He dipped some more water onto them from the pail by the table. He felt quite proud of himself. He had been thoroughly practical. He came in carrying the log, and Bill got up from the chair and helped him put it on the fire. That's a swell log, Nick said. I've been saving it for bad weather, Bill said. A log like that will burn all night. There'll be coals left to start the fire in the morning, Nick said. That's right, Bill agreed, and they were conducting the conversation at a high plane. Let's have another drink, Nick said. I think there's another open bottle in the locker, Bill said. He kneeled down in the corner in front of the locker and brought out a square-faced bottle. It's scotch, he said. I'll get more water, Nick said. He went out into the kitchen again. He filled the pitcher with the dipper and dipping cold spring water from the pail. On his way back to the living room, he passed a mirror in the dining room and looked in it. His face looked strange. He smiled at the face in the mirror, and it grinned back at him. He winked at it and went on. It was not his face, but it didn't make any difference. Bill poured out the drinks. That's an awfully big shot, Nick said. Not for us, Wemmage, Bill said. What'll we drink to? Nick asked, holding up the glass. Let's drink to fishing, Bill said. All right, Nick said. Gentlemen, I give you fishing. Ah, all fishing, Bill said. Everywhere. Fishing, Nick said. That's what we drink to. It's better than baseball, Bill said. There isn't any comparison, said Nick. How do we ever get talking about baseball? It was a mistake, Bill said. Baseball is a game for louts. They drank all that was in their glasses. Now, let's drink to Chesterton and Walpole, Nick interposed. Nick poured out the liquor. Bill poured in the water. They looked at each other. They felt very fine. Gentlemen, Bill said, I give you Chesterton and Walpole. Exactly, gentlemen, Nick said. They drank. Bill filled up the glasses. Then they sat down in the big chairs in front of the fire. You were very wise, Wemmage, Bill said. What do you mean, said Nick. To bust off that Marge business, Bill said. I guess so, said Nick. It wasn't the only thing to do. If you hadn't, by now, you'd be back home working to try to get enough money to get married. Nick said nothing. Once a man's married, he's absolutely bitched. Bill went on. He hasn't got anything anymore. Nothing. There's not a damn thing he's done for. You've seen guys that get married. Nick said nothing. You can tell them, Bill said. They've got that sort of married look. They're done for. Sure, said Nick. It was probably bad busting it off, Bill said. But you always fall for somebody else, and then it's all right. Fall for them, but don't let them ruin you. Yes, said Nick. If you had married her, you would have had to have married the whole family. Remember, her mother and that guy she married? Nick nodded. Imagine having them around the house all the time and going to Sunday dinner with their house and having them over to dinner and her telling Marge all the time about what to do and how to act. Nick sat quiet. You came out of it damned well, Bill said. Now, she can marry somebody of her own sort and settle down and be happy. You can't mix oil and water, and you can't mix that sort of thing anymore. Then I'd marry Ida that works for the Statons. She'd probably like it too. Nick said nothing. The liquor had all died out of him and left him alone. Bill wasn't there. He wasn't sitting in front of the fire or going fishing tomorrow with Bill and his dad or anything. He wasn't drunk. It was all gone. All he knew was that he had once had Marjorie and that he had lost her. She was gone, and he had sent her away. This was all that mattered. He might never see her again. Probably he never would. It's all gone. Finished. Let's have another drink, Nick said. Bill poured it out. Nick splashed in a little water. If you had gone on that way, we wouldn't be here now, Bill said. That was true. His original plan had been to go home to get a job. Then he planned to stay at Charlevoix all winter so he could be near Marge. Now he did not know what he was going to do. Probably we wouldn't even be going fishing tomorrow, Bill said. You had the right dope, all right. I couldn't help it, Nick said. I know, that's the way it works out, Bill said. All of a sudden, everything was over, Nick said. I don't know why it was. I couldn't help it. Just like when the 3-day blows come now and then and rip all the leaves off the trees. Well, it's over. That's the point, Bill said. It wasn't. It was my fault, Nick said. It doesn't make any difference whose fault it was, Bill said. No, I suppose not, Nick said. The big thing was that Marjorie was gone, and that probably he would never see her again. He had talked to her about how they would go to Italy together and how fun it would be, places they would go together. It's all gone now. Something gone out of him. So long as it's over, that's all that matters, Bill said. I tell you, Wimage, I was worried while it was going on. You played it right. I understand her mother was sore as hell. She told a lot of people you were engaged. We weren't engaged, Nick said. It was all around that you were. I can't help it, Nick said. We weren't. Weren't you going to get married? Bill asked. Yes, but we weren't engaged, Nick said. What's the difference? Bill asked judiciously. I don't know. There's a difference? There's a difference. I don't see it, said Bill. All right, said Nick. Let's get drunk. All right, Bill said. Let's get really drunk. Let's get drunk and then go swimming, Nick said. He drank off his glass. I'm sorry as hell about her, but what could I do, he said. You know what her mother was like. She was terrible, Bill said. All of a sudden it was over, Nick said, and I couldn't talk about it. I oughtn't talk about it. You aren't, Bill said. I talked about it, and now I'm through. We won't ever speak about it ever again. You won't have to think about it. You might get back into it again. Nick had not thought about that. It had seemed so absolute. That was the thought. That made him feel better. Sure, he said, there's always that danger. He felt happy now, and there was not anything that was irrevocable. He might go into town Saturday. Today was Thursday. There's always a chance, he said. You'll have to watch yourself, Bill said. I'll watch myself, he said. He felt happy. Nothing was finished. Nothing was ever lost. He would go into town Saturday. It felt lighter, as he had felt before Bill started to talk about it. There was always a way out. Let's take the guns and go down to the point and look for your dad, Nick said. All right. Bill took down the 2 shotguns from the rack on the wall. He opened a box of shells. Nick put on his Mackinaw coat and his shoes. His shoes were still stiff from drying. He was still quite drunk, but his head was clear. How do you feel? Nick asked. Swell. I've got a good edge on. Bill was buttoning up his sweater. There's no use getting drunk. No, we ought to get outdoors. They stepped out the door. The wind was blowing a gale. The birds will be right down in the grass with this, Nick said. They struck down towards the orchard. I saw a woodcock this morning, Bill said. Maybe we'll jump him, Nick said. Well, you can't shoot in this wind, Bill said. Outside now, the Marge business was no longer so tragic. It was not even that important. The wind blew everything like that away. It's coming right off the big lake, Nick said. Against the wind, they heard the thud of a shotgun. That's Dad, Bill said. He's down in the swamp. Let's cut down that way, Nick said. Let's cut across the lower meadow and see if we can jump anything, Bill said. All right, Nick said. None of it was important now. The wind blew it right out of his head. Still, he could always go into town Saturday night. It was a good thing to have that in reserve. Good night.